I don't know where indigenous British people like Tommy will run to when the country decides that they shouldn't be there anymore. Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm here in my bomb shelter in Tel Aviv to talk about Tommy Robinson. I'm going to do this properly. I'm going to try and record this in one take. I really don't want to spend a long time editing this because it might be a long video anyway. So I've got my coffee, my beverage. Thank you, Scott Adams. This is a creation I call Coffefe. It is obviously iced filter coffee and fluffy milk from the Nespresso machine. But what are we here today to talk about? Well, I wasn't going to address Melanie Phillips. I sort of avoided it when it was in the Times. I avoided it. I didn't want to talk directly to Melanie Phillips and her criticism because Melanie is someone I actually respect and still respect. But we have a difference of opinion on Tommy Robinson specifically. I'll lay my cards out on the table. I have met Melanie a few times. I bump into her from time to time because I do. And so she knows me, I know her. And we differ on this. But I want to go through her piece, which she's written following Tommy's appeal. Okay. And this really means a great deal to me, obviously. I've been close to what Tommy was doing for a long time, much longer than many people. And in fact, I don't think it's wrong to say that I mentioned Tommy to Melanie Phillips in conversation quite some time ago. And her reaction, she's been very consistent and consistent with what she writes. So, there's consistency here. But I want to go through the piece that she's written. So we'll start at the beginning. Tommy Robinson, the anti-Islam activist, has been freed on bail by the Court of Appeal, which has quashed his contempt of court order and ordered a retrial. His supporters are crowing that this proves they were right all along. Okay. Yes, he is an anti-Islam activist. So, at least in this, Melanie is absolutely spot on. No far-right nonsense here because, she's also called far-right and that's also nonsense. So I think we can all agree that we might disagree over the vehemence and the way in which one approaches the problem of Islamization of the UK, but I agree, Melanie agrees, Tommy agrees. There's a definite problem with the way Islam is being handled in the UK. Now, I'm going to just skip on past this because it's mostly covering the ground that I've covered, which is the ruling by the Lord Chief Justice. Okay, so this she chooses to pull out because I'll read it and then I'll explain what my thoughts are. We recognize that the judge was placed in an invidious position because he was concerned about the integrity of the trial, which was almost at its end. The 3 trials of which this was then second were exceptionally difficult and sensitive. Having decided to suspend the deliberations of the jury, it is understandable that he may have felt under some pressure to resolve the issue of the appellant's contempt expeditiously. However, once it had become apparent that the appellant was cooperating in removing the video from the internet, there was no reason why the jury could not have been permitted to resume their deliberations. If there was any doubt about the intentions of the appellant, the judge could have sought an undertaking from or ordered the appellant not to comment further on the trial or approach the court until the trial or trials had been concluded. Okay. And then she writes this thing. Only someone with a mind totally closed to reason could read that and still claim that the judge jailed Robinson to silence him for political reasons. This is where my difference with Melanie comes, specifically because that is looking at Tommy Robinson and the entirety of Tommy's career in opposing jihad and Islamization of UK. That's looking at Tommy on that one day alone, and to not think that there has been any history. I mean, there's been a book's worth of history. It's called Enemy of the State. I've read it. I proofread it. It's It's not just something I've read, though. I've heard Tommy tell me those stories, and I heard them told to me. Many of the ones that relate from the time of the EDL, I remember contemporaneously what happened. And it is as described by Tommy in that book. So to say that the judge was unaware of Tommy's background at the point where he was jailed, and that Tommy's background and prior activities didn't come into it, that's where those of us who understand Tommy a bit better think that some political element crept in. That's what I said in my other video. I think this judge thought he would be a hero for sending Tommy Robinson to prison. The other thing is here, she says, where does she say it? No one expected. Here, no one expected yesterday's ruling because Robinson had admitted the contempt and apologized. Okay, that line is just totally wrong. The appeal ruling now says that Tommy didn't know what he was admitting to in Leeds. The specifics of the contempt were not explained. Therefore, Tommy's admission of guilt, if there was one, just like the conviction and the sentence, were thrown out. They are quashed. They are gone. They do not exist. As far as I can understand, the exact moment we're in now is that Tommy has been arrested for a breach of the peace and is released on bail. And in the meantime, he had 2 months in solitary confinement where he was being fed. I don't like to use this loosely, but he was being fed like a concentration camp victim. It appears that he was only eating one tin of tuna a day and a piece of fruit because he was only eating food he could be sure of the provenance of. He has lost 45 pounds, 3 stone or something. If you look at him, and I've known him so long, when he came in that video of him coming out of prison, he does not look right. I have never seen him look that way, even after his other prison sentences. I hope he hasn't been crushed by the system, but his interview with Tucker Carlson last night, it would appear that serious damage has been done to him. So he has already been punished for a crime he has as yet has not been convicted of. He hasn't been convicted of contempt in Leeds. Okay? Now, you can say that there was an activation of the sentence from Canterbury, and that would have put him inside. But again, there have been 2 mistakes made, one by Canterbury and one by Leeds, by probably the clerk of the court, and then in both cases, the judges in those cases failing to rectify this error. And the error is a serious one. It's included in the appeal result, which is that he was sent down as if he was a criminal instead of a civil case. And that drastically altered the way in which he was treated in prison. So, to say that this was nobody expected yesterday's ruling is wrong. I dreamed of yesterday's ruling, and it is absolutely fair when one starts to know the case. And this is something that the secret barrister that everyone has been crowing about has basically owned up to. This is his blog. My reflections at the conclusion of this piece on whether I was too hasty to assume the correctness of the procedure, I stand by. He was too hasty. Many people were. Many people said that it was quite right within the British legal system to just throw people in prison with no proper adequate representation, and judges could just do this. Judges can do that if you stand up in their court and call them a bad word. They can do that. And then they can send you to prison for a few days to cool off. But they cannot tear a father away from his children and his wife at a moment's notice for an undefined crime. And that's exactly what the appeal court said. The appeal court was absolutely scathing about this judge in Leeds. I'm just looking through here. Okay, let's go to this. What Robinson's crowing supporters are not saying, moreover, is that his lawyers had wanted his conviction thrown out altogether without a retrial. Yes, that's how lawyers work. They ask for everything. You don't get everything. That, to be honest, is I think why they asked to be allowed first to appeal and appealed, the conviction in Canterbury, I don't think they really thought this was likely to be opened up again. There was, as I said, there was this technical problem, which was that the sentencing papers were just drawn up wrong. They were inaccurate, and they led to a big problem for Tommy. But that was a negotiating gambit. I mean, that's ask for the earth. That's in Donald Trump's book. Go read it. It's in Art of the Deal. You have to ask for everything. I believe that the judge didn't throw out the case because he does need this contempt to be looked at, because it raises serious questions about the underlying order that the judge in Leeds, Geoffrey Marzen, it raises serious questions about the scope of his ability to ban the repeating of information that was already in the public domain. We don't know. That hasn't been tested yet. Wasn't tested in Tommy's kangaroo court hearing in Leeds. So they're going to test that. And there are so many other mitigating factors. If you watch the whole of the 1 hour 15, which I did, I watched it live. I was in the park in Tel Aviv. I know exactly where I was as I was walking and watching the entire Facebook Live video, which, by the way, at peak had 10,000 viewers. Now, for those of you who don't run large Facebook pages, I can tell you Facebook lies about the number of people who watch videos. The number that you see on a video is people who have watched, I think, somewhere between 3 and 10 seconds of a video, or even it might be as little as 3 seconds of a video. Within the background, you get to see who's watched it for between 3 and 10 seconds. That video did not have 250,000 viewers that day. There is no way on earth that it did. It was taken down. It's all over the internet, though. It's all over YouTube. Which comes to another point. The judge in Leeds claimed at the time that this could be prejudicial not only to the second trial that he was about to close, but to the third trial that is either yet to start. We don't know. I just don't even know. I don't know the details of that. That's what's covered by a reporting restriction. If this 1 hour, 15-minute video of Tommy standing on the steps is prejudicial, why is it still on the internet? This is a point I've made in many videos. Why is it still on YouTube? It is not uploaded by Tommy's people. He doesn't have the ability to take it down. But the judge in Leeds, with the stroke of a pen, can write a little note that goes to YouTube, goes to Facebook, and goes to any other site you think is important and says, take down this video within the UK. If either any of those companies get a piece of paper like that from a judge in Leeds, that video will be off the internet in seconds. Why has that not happened in the last 2 months? If this material is so possibly prejudicial, there are so many other mitigation factors, and those are listed in in the appeal. The grounds on which Tommy can seek mitigation. That's if even there really is a case that you can find him guilty of. The judge also left him out there for 1 hour 50. He was streaming for 1 hour 15 minutes. In the court papers, it's clear that they were aware he was doing that quite early on. Nobody asked him to stop. Now, you can say that based on this judgment from Canterbury, he shouldn't have been anywhere near it. Well, had he phoned me that morning and said, should I go to Canterbury? I would have told him not to, because, I'm saner. But I could see in that video that Tommy was doing everything he could to avoid breaching the conditions, the specific conditions that were laid out for him by the Canterbury judge. He was not referring to the defendants as guilty. He was not calling them nasty names. He was pointing out their innocence until proven guilty. He was doing all of that. He was combative. He was his usual self, but actually that combativeness was more with passerbys. He was identifying the defendants, but only in as much as they are already identified on a number of websites that I can refer you to, and you can go and see them right now. The Canterbury conviction also, that started with a 4:30 a.m. home raid. Why? Everybody knows, the police know how to get hold of Tommy. The court knows how to get hold of Tommy. You can phone him up and say, please report to this court. Why do you have to raid his home at 4:30 in the morning? He's not going anywhere. That was totally unnecessary for someone who had made a mistake whilst acting in the way of a journalist. In one other part of this, I'm going to just zip forward here to something that I think is important. Moreover, okay, this is Melanie again. Moreover, Robinson's claim to be the one person in Britain telling the truth about Islamization is nonsensical. I was drawing attention to Islamization and to the government's refusal to address it properly years before Robinson was ever heard of. Yes, it's true that this most serious problem continues and the state is largely still in denial. Yes, it is true that appallingly the Pakistani Muslim rape grooming gangs were ignored for years, but they were exposed by my Times colleague, Andrew Norfolk, and trial after trial has been bringing them to justice ever since. Okay, about Andrew Norfolk. Andrew Norfolk clearly says in the BBC documentary Betrayed Girls, which I'm not going to drop a clip in here, but you can find it. I'll link to this clip. He clearly says that the EDL marching across northern England, especially in towns where Andrew was already aware of rumours, the EDL marching in those towns was a serious factor that made him call up his editor and say, look, I'd like to research this and I'd like to see where the evidence leads and publish. Because Andrew really understood that the connection between a large number of cases that had already come to court over the years, the one connection that mattered was that the gangs were all Muslims. And nobody wanted to say that. And that was what was covered up. Now, Andrew Norfolk did that, but before Andrew Norfolk had done that, Tommy Robinson had brought this thing up on Newsnight, on his famous appearance on Newsnight, where the BBC threw him into Newsnight thinking Jeremy Paxman will destroy this football hooligan from Luton and make mincemeat of him. And that interview came out with Paxman looking shaken because Tommy did what he always does. He told you his personal experiences, and there's nothing more powerful than that. That doesn't detract from anything that any other people. I know so many people who went through from 2001 or even before, talking about Islamization in the UK, all of whom have been sidetracked. Melanie Phillips, I know you have been sidetracked. You've been thrown out. You were thrown out of The Guardian. You've been disowned by the left from which you come. You're called far right, which is the most ridiculous thing ever, because you do speak honestly about Islam. But you might not like the more direct and more blunt approach that Tommy takes. But I've got to tell you, there's still no evidence that he's wrong and you are right. That these differences, it's still up in the air. There's one thing though, the history that he has gone through, because he is not well-spoken, he is not Oxbridge educated, that is undeniably his. And the persecution, of which this is just the most recent, the persecution, if it happened once, if it happened twice, there's only one time he's gone to prison as far as I'm concerned, or even an arrest during the whole saga I've known him. The only one that absolutely he's banged to rights on was the using somebody else's passport to go to America. But even in that, the sentence he got was extreme. The solitary confinement that he got during the sentence to avoid being killed was extreme. All of this doesn't happen to other people. And I'm just going to finish with something, because the secret barrister, actually, to his credit, picks up something good. He highlights this article that was in The Sun, Lout of Order, which is basically hammering Tommy Robinson for being a grandstanding idiot. Okay, And the Sun is wrong. The Sun doesn't understand its audience, and the Sun will also suffer because of this. There's one line here. This is the line. His many convictions stretch from violence to fraud. We have no sympathy. I'm going to read The Secret Barrister. I can't believe. This ugly and unnecessary throwaway reveals one of the biggest problems we have with our understanding of justice. The same problems that many of us are quick to highlight in our opponents. And that is that Robinson's character, conduct, and previous convictions, as reprehensible as they may be, are utterly irrelevant to the issue determined at the appeal, namely whether he received a fair hearing. He did not, and he did not. He is as entitled as any of us to redress, or at least to acknowledge, or at the very least to an acknowledgement of being wronged. The attitude of "who cares, he's a criminal" mirrors the exact sentiment that has left the criminal justice system, from legal aid through to prisons, in its present desperate state. It is immaterial whether Robinson has committed horrible crimes. By the way, he hasn't. Many people who appear before the courts have, especially in my line of work, and rights, if they mean anything, have to apply to everyone. It's an obvious point, but this fundament of the rule of law is too often forgotten when we are confronted by society's most unlovely. This is the point. If you are rushing to judge Tommy, if you rushed to claim that his imprisonment was just and happens all the time like that, when now the Lord Chief Justice has said, absolutely, this was a massive miscarriage. You did it possibly because you think he's a thug and he's not like you and he doesn't deserve your support. He absolutely does. And what is happening to Tommy is a shocking, shocking indictment of the state of Britain. And if he were to come to me for advice right now, I would tell him to try and leave the UK as fast as possible. He and his family do not have a future there. And that is the saddest thing I can say about Britain. I already said it 9 years ago about my own family, but I've got somewhere to run to. I'm Jewish, and now I'm Israeli. So it was natural to come to Israel. I don't know where indigenous British people like Tommy will run to when the country decides that they shouldn't be there anymore.